Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, today we're going to be looking at two distros on Ubuntu on a DistroWars. Mostly this is to answer a question for somebody that asked on Fosstodon, and I am on Switch to Linux at Fosstodon for my Mastodon server. And we're going to look at LXQt and XFCE utilizing the Ubuntu community builds, Ubuntu and Xubuntu. And so somebody asked over there and said, hey, I'm kind of tossed up between LXQt and XFCE. Which one of these should I run? And so what I wanted to do is just kind of, instead of doing what we would usually do on a DistroWars, we are going to boot in, just have a quick peek at each one of the distributions. But what I want to do is focus on what really is the primary difference. And that really happens to be your toolkit that's used. Now, the GTK and Qt and modern Linux-based desktop systems really doesn't make a lot of difference as it used to. There was a time when there really did matter. Now they work well with each other. Most particularly your good distros, like your Ubuntu community builds, there's a lot of professional guys in these teams. They work hard to make sure that things run. There's nothing worse than running a GTK-based everything, but you got to use Kdenlive and it looks like all living hell broke out on your desktop. That type of stuff is generally fixed. But really, this is more of an under the hood. It used to be a little bit more stylistic, but this really is your difference because these two desktops between LXQt and XFCE, they're both very lightweight desktops. They use very little RAM. They use very little processing power. Ultimately, they're good choices. It's just that LXQt, of course, is based on the Qt toolkit, and XFCE is based on the GTK toolkit. So this article here from Make Use Of is an excellent little discussion. Really, what is the difference? And I'll go ahead and link this article down below so you can see a little bit of the history behind them. The GTK and the Qt are two open source, free and open source toolkit options that you have. And you're under the hood, these are basically the libraries. Now, I don't do specific programming. I do web design, however. And so in web design, I'll tell you that there's different toolkits for responsive. We have Bootstrap. There's different toolkits for themes, either in WordPress or other platforms. And you can kind of start with one of these and then build on top of it. This is really what you do. And so the GTK and Qt libraries are really there for the developers to build their software applications underneath it. They're both free and open source applications. So Qt in 91, GTK came out a little bit later. I forget exactly when. This, of course, came from the GIMP toolkit. That's really where it came from. And this was, I guess it became the toolkit, saw its first release in around 98 or so. And so with this, these two warring toolkits have become the basis. Now, most Linux desktop environments right now are GTK based. My favorite Cinnamon is GTK. Obviously, GNOME is GTK. We have Budgie based on GNOME is GTK. Your biggest Qt-based toolkit is Plasma, KDE Plasma. Then you have LXQt. This is also based on the Qt toolkit as well. So under the hood, that's really what we are looking at. So here we have some differences, and how much does it really matter which one we use? Well, in all honesty, it doesn't actually really matter from the end user point of view. Really, this is more of a question for developers. So at the final end of the day, which one should you use, LXQt or XFCE? Honestly, it doesn't really matter. So XFCE will look a little bit better because, face it, the GTK toolkit does actually have better UI implications. But regardless, we're going to go ahead and boot up the desktops here. And we're just going to show you very briefly, walk around some of the little differences you'll see. Now, as far as the applications, what we're going to find inside of your basic applications is they're going to run pretty much about, they're going to look about the same. Where you're going to have some differences is the basic operating system, how things look around all of the software packages and things like that. So first we're going to go ahead and have a look at LXQt on the Ubuntu desktop which is, of course, the Ubuntu Ubuntu running LXQt. So here we are. This is our login screen. Now, for some reason, my virtual box of this is laggy. I have run Ubuntu on other production builds in the past, and it actually runs very smooth. I'm not sure exactly what's behind all of my lag. Probably just yet another one of those, hey buddy, why don't you go ahead and update your VirtualBox 5 again? All right. So here we have a little update. So we do have an update notifier. Now, this is going to be something that you may or may not find on your particular build, but here on Ubuntu, they are good at telling you about updates. We can choose not to update it, or we can go ahead and upgrade it there. I'm going to not upgrade it right now over the course of doing the video. But this is your basic layout if we're going to be looking at Ubuntu running the Qt toolkit over here. And so when we have a look at it, let's just go ahead and see what this looks like. So if you've run Peppermint, older school Peppermint definitely had a lot more of this, a little bit less XFCE. They're kind of a merge and blending of the two, at least it used to be on Peppermint. So this is kind of what we see. You can see that it does look a little bit old and dated. We do have some icons there. And basically it works, it's functional. For me, I don't really get super hung up over the look of the UI as long as it's functional. And the UI on this is very functional. So we do have access to, in this one here running the Qt, you're going to see that if you have a look through it, they're giving us a lot of the Qt based applications, KCalc, Arc, we got LX images. Just I want to see if they had transmission Qt. I just want to see if they had anything in here that's specifically Qt, like VLC is. I want to see if there was anything else that was GTK as well. If we want to go ahead and install something on GTK, it's actually going to work fairly well. So let's go ahead and I think this one has Discover. We'll go ahead and search for... This has Discover. We'll go ahead and install GIMP and have a look at what that looks like, because GIMP is indeed a GTK application. And what you'll find in most modern Linux, you're not really going to see a whole lot of difference in how these applications work. In the older days, you would actually see a lot of differences. You'd find that applications didn't seem to match the theme. You will still find some artifacts where themes do not match quite as well. I personally, like I said, I don't get super hung up over that as long as the application works. But we do just want to have a brief look at that. So here's GIMP. We just went ahead and installed this guy here. And it's booting up. And so you can see here, you know, the theming on the menus is a little bit different. A lot of that is GIMP actually does have its own theming applications. So you can go ahead and change the theming. I believe it's down in preferences if I remember. It's somewhere around here. You can change your theming. So you can see that this will use a variety. Here's your system. So this is going to borrow from whatever our system theming is, which, yeah, looks pretty old. And then we have our light, we have our gray, and we have our dark options. So with GIMP, you can choose whether you want to go with the system or the newer themes. So overall, that's kind of what you're going to get. Under the hood, there's a lot of little differences in how the toolkits are put together. As far as the basic end user, there's not going to be a lot of difference. Now, one of these is actually a little bit better than the other as far as system resources. So you can see here we're running 400 megabytes of RAM on my 6 gig virtual machine here, and nothing else is really being stressed. So that's kind of what we see over here on Ubuntu. Now let's go ahead and have a look at XFCE and have a look at what that looks like on Ubuntu. So here we are on our login screen for Ubuntu. This is, of course, running XFCE, which is built on GTK. So go ahead and get logged in over here. And what we're going to find now, I personally still think that XFCE does look very dated. It is highly possible to make it look any way you want to make it look. So you can make it look pretty good. I am getting this system program problem detected. I don't know what that is, and it doesn't give me any further details, so ignore that. Again, I'm running this on an old VirtualBox, so don't worry much about that. Yes, I am actually working on upgrading my computer, by the way. I have a few other projects that need to be done, and then I will have the available hard drive space available to do that. So let's go ahead and boot up the file manager here. You can still see that it does look a little bit dated, but in my opinion, it does look better than the LXQt did. So a lot of this, you can change the icons. That's not too difficult to do. There are theming settings in both of these. We didn't go into those, but you can kind of see what this looks like. We have, shinier, nicer looking icons over here. The layout is very similar, but does have a lot more going into it. And this is why XFCE does have a lot better of a look. So having a look through scanning through their applications, we're going to find here that we have a lot more things that are based on the GTK toolkit out of the box rather than the Qt toolkit. And so if I'm not mistaken, I might be, so pardon me if I am. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that VLC is based on Qt. So we're going to go ahead and install that and have a brief look at what that looks like. All right, so I went ahead and installed VLC. I did it through the terminal just to more quickly get it installed. I started with the Snap version, and it was taking forever. So here we have it. And I did, by the way, while it was trying to install, I did verify, yes, VLC is based on Qt. So remember that we are on a GTK desktop, and you can see it looks just fine. Comparing that to the system, let's go ahead and open up the home folder and just have a brief look at the system. You can see this one versus this one. Very similar. And so that's why it really doesn't make a lot of difference which one you run. You're going to have good results. Now, as an overall recommendation, if you are, for example, running your applications and you're running pretty much Qt applications, you might benefit better by going with LXQt or Plasma. But if you are running on your mostly on GTK applications, you might pick XFCE if you're going with lightweight or most other desktops. I'm trying to see where is my system monitor so we can check our system spaces here. I had installed HTOP here so we can monitor these. You can see that this one is actually running a little bit more, about twice as much memory, still under a gig. So not a lot. So you can see the XFCE is actually running a little bit more memory than the LXQt did. So if you're really low amount of memory on your computer and you can't upgrade the memory, yeah, the LXQt might be a little bit better. But between these two, having a look at Qt versus GTK, if you want a little bit better UI, XFCE would be a little bit better of a choice. If you're running mostly GTK applications, again, XFCE would probably be the better choice. But for most people, it doesn't make much of a difference. In modern Linux, as far as the end user is concerned, LXQt versus XFCE or GTK versus Qt isn't going to make a lot of difference. Now, if you're a programmer, you probably have strong opinions about one toolkit over another for a variety of development reasons. That's perfectly okay. That's completely acceptable. It's just for the final end user. So to answer that final question, which one of these is the better option to use? It really is going to depend on your use case. If you're finding yourself using mostly GTK applications, go with XFCE. If you're finding yourself using mostly Qt applications, go with LXQt. If you have very low system specs, LXQt is going to be the better choice. If you want to prioritize a better looking system, XFCE gives you more control and customizability over that. So there's my final thought. Let me know your favorites between these two desktops or these two Ubuntu distributions in the comments down below. Thank you for watching this video from Switched2Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.